Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, April 7th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Today was San Diego's first day in the orange tier with fewer COVID-19 restrictions, and for many a day of optimism in what's been a difficult time, as we all know. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman now with how some local businesses are looking ahead.
Oh, that's awesome. You know, we get to increase our capacity indoors by 25%, and I think it gives consumers a little bit more confidence.
Just outside Petco Park, City Tacos owner Gerald Torres is opening up a new location that was more than a year in the making.
Basically, it was scheduled to open in March of last year, but then COVID hit.
Now things are different. Fans can be seated inside Petco Park, and now that we're in the state's orange reopening tier, the Padres can increase their stadium capacity to 33%.
There's a lot of positive energy and positive attitude in our industry that things are opening back up, that we can all get back to work and make a living, support our families, support our staff.
Brant Crenshaw owns Social Tap, which is also right next to Petco Park.
I can't wait till we get completely opened up, but you know, this isn't a bad alternative.
Now he can increase his indoor capacity, which has allowed him to bring back more staff, but things are not entirely back to normal.
This year, you know, a little different, you know, butts in every seat. You know, you're not standing at the bar, you're not mingling around, you know, safety protocols are a little different. I'll tell you what, I'll take this over last year, because last year was, I mean, we were in a lockdown.
He and others say they're feeling a renewed sense of optimism, especially now that the governor has announced a target date of June 15th to lift nearly all COVID-19 restrictions.
It's the first time that we would have a hard date to actually plan around.
Jess Pierce is the manager of Ale Tales Taproom in the East Village, which opened just a couple months before the pandemic first hit.
Just a constant adaptation. We miss people at the bar, we miss strangers meeting each other at the bar, but it'll eventually get back there.
This spot is less than half a mile away from Petco Park, and Pierce is hoping to see some Padre fans this season, especially now that we're in the orange reopening tier.
Let's go to the left.
But business owners say they have to gradually scale up their operations.
It's still a slow process. People are gaining that confidence to go out and you know, enjoy lunches and enjoy dinners, and we have to grow along with it. If you don't, you know, your numbers are not going to be right, and you put the business in jeopardy.
Even with progress, California Restaurant Association President Jot Condi is estimating 30% of eateries statewide will shut their doors because of the pandemic.
We hear every day that goes by, there's restaurants that are just, on the edge, and many of them fall off. So we fully expect that in between now and June 15, there will be more restaurants that just have to throw in the towel.
Businesses may also see a late night boost in sales too. Effective today, the county's 10 p.m. curfew for restaurants and bars is officially gone. Here outside Petco Park, Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
New guidance from the governor, San Diego State University and UC San Diego are planning to return to primarily in-person instruction and activities this fall. SDSU's president says the school is opening up on-campus housing to thousands more students. Residence halls at UCSD will be near 100% capacity. University officials expect around 90% of students and 85% of staff to be fully vaccinated by the fall quarter. California has administered over 4.2 million COVID-19 vaccines to some of the state's hardest hit communities. KPBS reporter Melissa May shows us how San Diego is helping its disadvantaged areas get vaccinated.
Equity continues to be a focus of vaccine efforts in San Diego. The hardest hit communities account for 40% of COVID cases and deaths within the lowest quartile of the Healthy Places Index, or HPI.
It's about improving the health of our Black and brown members of the Southeast San Diego area.
Events like today's Community Health and Resource Fair at the Jackie Robinson YMCA help make vaccines more accessible. Founder of the health fair, Dr. Susanna Flalo, received a request from Governor Newsom to help.
First and foremost, we're trying to get our community vaccinated. So we were gifted with 1,000 Johnson & Johnson vaccines that UCSD is here with the volunteers to provide for our community.
Along with administering vaccines, events like this are educating people about getting it. Breast cancer survivor and founder of Many Shades of Pink, Wendy Shereld, took the vaccine advice.
I realized that I would be out here unprotected. So that's really what made me the education and wanting to protect myself and my family.
South Bay resident Ricky Salazar was grateful to have easier access to the vaccine.
This is fantastic, for our community. We're hurt so much in our businesses. We want to get all the business going again.
The California Department of Public Health is still allocating 40% of vaccines to these areas and will continue to partner with community-based programs. The CDPH also has plans for a new program to text people in certain zip codes when vaccine appointments are available. Melissa May, KPBS News.
And a reminder, we have more information about how and where to get your shot at kpbs.org. Just go to our homepage and then click on the Vaccines tab. La Mesa City Council member Akilah Weber now holds a commanding lead in the race to fill her mother's seat in the state assembly. A day after voting ended, Weber has over 52% of the vote. But with over 9,000 estimated ballots left to be counted, it's still unclear whether she will stay above the 50% needed to avoid a June 8th runoff. She spoke to KPBS Midday Edition today.
We're very optimistic. However, we want every vote to be counted. And so at this point, what we know is that if there is a runoff, we will definitely be in it. And if there's not, then we will be headed to Sacramento.
If there is a runoff, Weber would face Republican challenger Marco Contreras, who has so far pulled in 33% of the vote in the 79th Assembly District. Weber says her apparent victory was propelled by her background and leadership when it comes to community health care in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, whether it's a case of children being dropped off by human smugglers or families self-separating, Border Patrol agents are rescuing more and more young children left to fend for themselves on this side of the border. On Monday afternoon, 2 young children abandoned at the U.S.-Mexico border were rescued by Border Patrol agents.
The siblings, a 5-year-old girl and 6-year-old boy, were dropped in Jacumba, where the border fencing meets large boulders. The agents had spotted a man and a woman with the children before they were hoisted into the U.S. side. Border Patrol agent Angel Moreno says the children were visibly upset and without provisions like food or water.
The only thing that they do have with them is a note with a phone number of their mother. And they also had their mother's name and phone number, I believe, on their forearm written.
The children, who are Mexican nationals, were taken in by the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement. This incident is just the latest in the influx of children being left alone at the international border.
Since April of 2020, not only the United States Border Patrol, but CBP as a whole has seen an increase in human apprehensions and the apprehensions of men, women, and children. So we are starting to see these types of events. And there has been a bit of an increase in recent history.
Last week, 2 Ecuadorian children were rescued after being dropped over a 14-foot border fence in New Mexico, near the border city of El Paso, Texas. And on April 1st, a 10-year-old migrant boy was found alone in a field in Texas, left there by the group he was traveling with. The boy is still in CBP custody.
Long Beach's City Council approved opening its convention center as a shelter for unaccompanied migrant children. The facility will be able to temporarily hold as many as 1,000 children. Like those staying at the San Diego Convention Center, they'll receive schooling as well as medical and mental health care. Mental health can be a hard topic to talk about, and for some cultures, it can be ignored. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne looks into some of the barriers preventing the Latinx community from seeking mental health help. A warning now, this report includes a graphic description of domestic violence and talk about self-harm that some viewers may find disturbing.
Estela Chamu's depression began when she left her hometown in Mexico at the age of 17. A family friend told her parents he had a job for Chamu in California, babysitting 2 American children. But there was no job, and the man who took her from her family wanted her as his woman instead.
In that ranch, I endured domestic violence. He would chase me with a rifle and slap me.
For 15 years, Chamu endured a forced and abusive relationship.
My life has been really sad. I would cry. I couldn't go anywhere. I had no activities. I was barred to the ranch.
Until one day she had enough and left. Once on her own, Chamu knew she wasn't okay and sought out help. But the Latinx community faces language barriers, less access to health care, and cultural influences that keep them from getting help with mental health.
I needed help with my mental health. The mentality we have as Latinos is I'm not crazy, and it's not that we're crazy. It's that we need support of a doctor, a specialist.
One of the biggest barriers is the stigma of being labeled crazy.
You have these people telling you, looking you in the face and telling you, you can just pray this demon away.
Andrea Vasquez was diagnosed with major depressive disorder when she was 16.
The anger was the bigger part of it, the depression, the panic attacks that I'd been having. And at that moment, I told him, this is a crisis because I don't want to live. Sorry.
Vasquez's depression got so bad she began self-harming and checked into a behavioral health center, something her Latinx parents had a hard time accepting.
I think it didn't want to accept the fact that I wasn't okay. And that's a big thing in the Latin community, that it's to believe that if your child, there's something wrong with your child, it was your fault.
The discomfort over mental health within the Latinx community also has to do with the lack of therapists that can understand the culture and the problems they face.
It's really hard to find a therapist that connects with those issues. Hey, I think I have problems with my family because of my culture. And you're talking to a white male therapist that has no idea what you're talking about.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Good. Then there are therapists like Lizette Ma, who is Latina and says she can relate to the cultural influences Latinos face when it comes to mental health help.
My grandma believes that if we pray to God and we do, a rosario, and if we go, pay our prayers to the church, God's going to grant us a miracle and the symptoms are going to go away.
Ma says she has to be culturally sensitive to the points of views of her patients and also incorporates them in her practice for successful treatment.
Yes, we can pray, but this needs something more. We have to respect their belief system, but also work with them. So what I tried to do is incorporate those beliefs.
Ma says there is still progress to be made in mental health services and thinks the pandemic made the need more urgent.
Think about what that's going to do to some people in the long run. We're going to see definitely increase of people who are, experiencing some mild symptoms of OCD or maybe some paranoia. There's all these things that we haven't even thought about or actually even seen because we're still in the midst of the pandemic.
As people rebuild their lives from the aftermath of the pandemic, Ma suggests not sleeping on mental health.
It doesn't simply go away. We need to learn and teach people the way to navigate and the way to seek out resources for their specific needs. And how do they do it? And how can they find someone that they connect with?
Chamu is building that bridge to resources for her community as part of Poder Popular, a North County advocacy group.
For me, it's a new life. Since I left my life with domestic violence and got involved with the groups, it's the most marvelous thing I have found in my life. My work for the community and the help I got.
Chamu says these activities have been the best medicine for her to get out of depression and help her community along the way. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
The Marine Corps is investigating the readiness of its troops before they participated in an exercise that turned deadly. The announcement follows the release of the report into the amphibious assault vehicle sinking off San Clemente Island that killed 8 Marines and 1 sailor last July. The report blamed inadequate training, shabby maintenance, and poor judgment by commanders. 3 commanders were fired as a result. The newly launched investigation could lead to additional disciplinary action. Day 8 of testimony in the Derek Chauvin murder trial picked up with a use of force expert testifying for the prosecution. The defense is trying to poke holes in the idea that training is one size fits all in real-life police situations. Akilah Bernal has the latest from Minneapolis.
My opinion was that no force should have been used once he was in that position.
That answer given by an LAPD use of force expert when asked by the prosecution how much force Derek Chauvin should have used on George Floyd once he was handcuffed and on the ground. And when asked if Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds would be considered deadly force, Sergeant Jody Steiger answering in the affirmative.
The pressure that was being caused by the body weight could cause positional asphyxia, which could cause death.
The defense trying to argue that use of force never looks the same and that many factors have to be considered in each situation. In this case, saying the crowd around the officers on May 25th of 2020 was distracting and posed a potential threat. But Steiger, a paid expert for the prosecution, disagreed.
They were merely filming, and most of it was their concern for Mr. Floyd.
Steiger also testifying that officers can only apply force based on the subject's actions, not those around them. In Minneapolis, Akilah Bernal, KPBS News.
San Diego County supervisors voted unanimously to adopt a resolution denouncing xenophobia and anti-Asian racism. According to the San Diego API Coalition, there were 42 reports of discrimination against the Asian and Pacific Islander community from March 2020 through the end of the year. In January, the Board of Supervisors declared racism a public health crisis. The podcast Blood on Gold Mountain tells the story of 1871 LA Chinatown massacre through the eyes of a young Chinese woman who arrives in California as a refugee. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando says the second episode of the podcast debuts today.
As we see a recent rise in hate crimes against Asians, the podcast Blood on Gold Mountain reminds us that this kind of racism is sadly not new. The 7-part podcast looks to one of the largest race lynchings in the U.S. The first episode introduced audiences to Yut Ho and the conditions under which she lived in California of the 1870s.
You see, Chinese in this country live outside the law. We can't speak to a judge unless it's to accuse another Chinaman, Indian or Mexican, of a crime. That means any Guala can bring down the law on us at any time. And the claim jumpers would almost certainly enlist the sheriff's help to run us out of town.
The podcast is narrated by Hao Huang, a music and humanities professor at Scripps College who conceived the project. He wanted to know why this incident, in which a mob killed nearly 24 Chinese people in LA's Chinatown, had been so ignored.
Was a mob of about 500 people who dragged out and lynched about 20 Chinese. Why was it neglected? I think this is something that's really pivotal to understanding race relations. Why do we neglect, or even in certain ways erase, the memory of something that happened in LA, which was the bloodiest race riot on the West Coast?
A new episode of Blood on Gold Mountain will be available every other Wednesday. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
San Diego researchers have found the biological mechanism that allows Venus flytraps to catch their living animal prey. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has the details.
Researchers at the Salk Institute have uncovered a key biological process that allows carnivorous plants to feed on live insects. Joanne Corey, who lives with Parkinson's disease, leads the Salk's plant biology lab.
It's kind of the holy grail of the whole touch sensing systems of
animals and plants.
Scientists cut thousands of microscopic trigger hairs from Venus flytraps and used genetic sequencing technology to identify proteins that reacted to touch. That revealed how certain proteins generated an electrical charge at the cellular level when those proteins are stimulated.
So we've been using carnivorous plants to try and understand better this sensory modality, how the plants sense touch.
The Salk Institute's Carl Procco says scientists found the same mechanisms exist in sundew, a plant with sticky tentacles that catch insects. Researchers are looking at replicating those protein systems that allow plants to capture food in animal and human cells.
Now you can apply an ultrasound stimulus, which is much like a touch stimulus, and you can perhaps modify the activity of those human cells.
Procco says that might be used to help the human body generate insulin, a benefit for people living with diabetes. The findings are published in the current edition of the journal eLife. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Our onshore flow continues right through the end of the weekend into the weekend. And we should see some stronger winds overnight and into the morning hours tomorrow. Little temperature change is expected here over the next few days. So near the coast, we'll be looking at near average temperatures, and well inland into the deserts, we'll be about 10 degrees or so above average. So it'll be hot, and the dry weather will continue. So no signs of any precipitation. Strong gusty winds tonight. Strong westerly winds in the mountains, and that has led to wind advisories here through the overnight and into the early morning hours on Thursday. Temperatures tonight, low 50s, Oceanside, San Diego 58, plenty of clouds rolling in with our onshore flow. Escondido's at 50 and El Cajon 54. Borrego Springs a mild 67 and Campo dipping down to about 50 degrees. For tomorrow, well, the heat holds in the interior sections, some mild temperatures near the coast, ridge of high pressure getting flattened by a little disturbance that's giving us the winds overnight and into early tomorrow. And tomorrow, waking up with clouds near the coast, coming into some of the valleys here, rising up to 77 Escondido, 82 El Cajon. Borrego Springs hits 95, and Mount Laguna about 61 degrees. Looking at Friday's weather, well, we're dry, warm in the interior, milder near the coast, and less wind. Here's a look at our temperatures next few days. Notice no real big changes. Morning clouds, afternoon sun, interior valleys. We'll see some clouds into the morning hours. Temperatures dipping down a little bit over the weekend. As we take you up into the mountains here, strong gusty winds into Thursday. Otherwise, it should be pleasantly cool. And into the deserts, it's looking hot and dry. Temperatures in the mid-90s for most days. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
First Lady Jill Biden has relaunched an initiative supporting military and veteran families, caregivers, and survivors. She was joined virtually by military families and advocates from around the world as she announced the next phase of joining forces. She first started the program 10 years ago with then First Lady Michelle Obama.
Service members cannot be focused on their mission if their families don't have what they need to thrive at home. You are the rudder that steers our military. And supporting your physical, social, and emotional health is a national security imperative.
And this afternoon, the First Lady toured the Military One Source Call Center. It provides 24/7 support to service members, their families, and survivors. And survivors of COVID-19 appear to be at increased risk of anxiety and mood disorders. That's according to a study that found a possible link between COVID infections and subsequent diagnosis of mental health and neurological disorders. Nadia Romero has a closer look.
A groundbreaking study shining new light into the longer-term impact coronavirus may have on the brain. 1/3 of COVID-19 survivors were diagnosed with a psychological or neurological condition within 6 months of their infection. That's according to a new study published in the journal Lancet Psychiatry. Researchers found the most common diagnosis was anxiety. It was found in 17% of the surveyed patients treated for COVID-19. That was followed by mood disorders and insomnia.
Every day we're learning something new
about this virus. And I personally have lost sleep over it. I've cried over it.
The study also found that stroke and dementia diagnoses were more rare, but not uncommon in people who had been seriously ill with COVID-19. Of those who had been admitted to intensive care, 7% had a stroke and almost 2% were diagnosed with dementia. Researchers say this is the first large-scale study looking into the risk of these types of psychiatric and neurological complications in the 6 months after a COVID-19 infection. For today's Health Minute, I'm Nadia Romero.
And here's another look at today's top stories. Today, San Diego County moved into the less restrictive orange tier. Restaurants are now able to operate at 50% of capacity indoors, while bars without food may begin outdoor operations. Museums, zoos, movie theaters, and places of worship can also increase capacity to 50%. Gyms can increase to 25% capacity indoors, while sporting events are up to 33% capacity. Border Patrol agents are rescuing more and more young children left behind along the border. On Monday, agents rescued a 5-year-old girl and 6-year-old boy who were dropped in Jacumba near the border fence. Agents spotted a man and a woman with the children before they were hoisted onto the U.S. side. The siblings were left with a phone number for their mother. And La Mesa City Council member Akilah Weber is leading the race to fill her mother's seat in the state assembly. So far, Weber has over 52% of the vote for the 79th district. But with ballots left to be counted, it's unclear whether she will stay above the 50% needed to avoid a June 8th runoff. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.